Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's great to see you guys out here again. Most of us are familiar with the 12 meridians in Chinese medicine, and each one of them is associated with a specific organ in the body. But I have a question for you. Are you familiar with the additional 8 meridians in the body, the 8 extraordinary vessels?
What? Really?
Well, you know what? It can be difficult to find information on the 8 extraordinaries because when traditional Chinese medicine, the curriculum was being created back in the 1950s, these were pretty much written out of the medicine.
No way.
And so traditional Chinese medicine, it was created under Mao, and it's a condensed version of classical Chinese medicine. And traditional Chinese medicine is what's taught in China, and it's what's taught in most of the schools here in the United States. So this episode, it's going to be fun because especially if you've been working on your meditation, because meditation is all about understanding and managing your energy. And these vessels, they're all about energetics. So to give you some background, even though I heard about the 8 extraordinaries when I was studying traditional Chinese medicine, it was like studying yin and yang at that time. It was like 2 or 3 pages. And it wasn't until afterwards, when I started learning about Taoism, that I was able to understand these meridians better. So in this episode, I am going to give you the 10,000 foot level of some of the classical thoughts on these vessels. And it's just going to be this outline that you can work with. And from that outline, you're going to be able to kind of reach out and, explore other topics. So let's look at what we are going to cover. There's going to be 3 major categories. So, identifying these 8 extraordinary vessels. And then we're going to look at why they're important. What is the classical theory and philosophy on these? And then we're going to talk about the third part of this, which is treating disease. So when we're looking at the second part, which is the importance of these, here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the Taiji pole. We're going to talk about the 4 phases of universal energy. We're going to talk about the Bagui, the 64 hexagrams, destiny and free will, and Ming Men. Now, so almost all of this you can see ties into the I Ching. And there's a number of old scholars that say that they don't really understand how you can practice Chinese medicine without studying the I Ching, because Chinese medicine is about movement and how energetics move in the body, and that is all that the I Ching is about. Okay, so let's touch base on the first thing that we're going to talk about, which is the identification of these 8 extraordinary vessels. And so here are the names of the 8 extraordinary vessels. Du Mai, Ren Mai, Dai Mai, Chang Mai, Yin Chao Mai, Yang Chao Mai, Yin Wei Mai, Yang Wei Mai. Okay, now you're going to find that out there in the real world, there's going to be like a couple different names for each one of these channels. So the Du Mai is also called the governing vessel, and the Chao Mai, the Yin and the Yang Chao Mai, are also known as the heal vessels. The Yin Wei and Yang Wei vessels, they're also called the Yin linking and the Yang linking vessels. So those are just a couple different names that these have. I'm going to stick with this because that's where I started out in Chinese medicine, and so it just makes sense to me. Okay, so that's the 8 vessels. So going back to what we're covering, why are these important? Well, the first part of this is going to be about Tai Chi symbol. And the thing that makes these vessels important, these 8 vessels important, is they're the absolute first physical thing that's going to be created in the body. So let's start with the egg. And, the egg is fertilized and the egg becomes a zygote. And then the zygote splits. And when it does that split, it creates the dumai and the renmai. So the dumai and the renmai are the yang and the yin. So the dumai is yang and the yin is the renmai. And the Tai Chi symbol represents the du and the ren mai. So, if you remember the episode Yin Yang and the Creation and Life, so Yin Yang and the Creation of Life, I chat on this concept a little bit. And so, all the symbolism that goes into the Tai Chi symbol is going to be captured in the du and the ren mai. And part of that is that you need these polar opposites to have life. It's the pull of the opposite that creates movement, and that movement is what creates life. So as long as there's movement, there's life. When things aren't moving, no longer life. Okay. So then the next thing that happens is the cell divides again, and it divides into 2 more cells. So now you have 4 cells, and that split, when those 2 cells split into the 4, that creates a division that creates the next 2 extraordinary vessels, the daimai and the changmai. And they say that those 4, now the 4 cells create what is called the 4 phases of universal energy. So I am going to show you an energy diagram. And let's see here. So this energy diagram, you will see this diagram a lot when you are studying the I Ching. So the du and the ren, the first line is the yang line, which is a solid line, and then the yin line, which is a divided line. Now that's the first split, and that's the Tai Chi symbol. And then when it splits again to the 4, that's the 4 phases of universal energy, and that's the second line. And so what does this mean? So this is a concept from the I Ching, and they say that the I Ching is the oldest of all the classical Chinese texts. They believe that this text dates back to the Zhang dynasty around 1600 BC. But scholars also say that there were probably 2 earlier forms of the I Ching that they were just lost. Okay, so let's look at this. The 4 universal energies are the Tai Yang, so that's heaven, and Tai is ultimate Yang, and then Xiao Yang, which is lesser Yang, which is the father, Tai Yin, which is ultimate Yin, which is earth, Xiao Yin, which is lesser Yin, which is the mother. So if you look at these energies, there's always this concept of 3 in Chinese medicine, and you're thinking, well, okay, we're looking at 4. How does that relate to 3? Okay, let me tell you about the trilogies in Chinese medicine. You're going to find a lot of trilogies in Chinese medicine, in Taoism, in Confucianism, in the I Ching. There is a lot of chatter about these trilogies. And depending on where you're standing, the trilogies they're the same concept, but they represent different things. So, if we're looking at heaven and earth, then in between that is humans. So heaven, earth, and humans, that is a trilogy. And if you're looking at the physical body, that same concept is the Shen, which is heaven, Jing, which is earth, and then Qi, which is the humans. So, depending on where you're standing, you have these trilogies. Now, why these 4 universal energies are important is, one thing that they represent is the container needed to create the middle component of the trilogy. So the physical human body, or Qi. Okay, so if you look at this, you have this spiritual heaven and earth, which is the Tai Yang and the Tai Yin, and that's going to create the spark of life and the container that presents the energetic potential for a physical body. And then you have the physical container that you'd like to fill up. So you have the Xiaoyang, which is a father, or Shen, and you have the Xiaoyin, which is a mother, or Jing. And in that container is where you want to have Qi. And so Qi is created between these two, and it forms the physical body. And you're wondering, okay, how does Qi form the physical body? Well, that would be another episode where we talk about the 5 spirits and the Po and the lungs. And I haven't done that episode yet. I think you can, if you look on my website at best-acupuncture.com, there's information on the 5 lights of illumination. And I think there's even an episode out here on my channel on the 5 lights of illumination, which talks about the orbs, and then we'd have to take it one more step to get to the spirit. But the Ren and the Du Mai represent the yin and yang, and they're going to be the first vessels created. And then the cells divide a second time, and they create the Dai and the Chong Mai, and the 4 vessels represent the 4 universal energies. Okay, so now what happens? Well, the cells are going to split again. And when they split again, they're going to create 8 cells. And those 8 cells are called the Bagui. And the Bagui, okay, that's the foundation of the I Ching.
What?
That's the foundation of this book.
No way.
They call it this book of divination. And it's really this book of understanding energies. So let's look at that energy diagram again. So this last line is going to be the Bagui, and that's the 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One of them's behind me, but that's the 8 trigrams that are used, that are combined to make the hexagrams in the I Ching. So what's interesting is all of this happens about within the first 60 hours of the egg being fertilized. So when you have the 8 cells that represent the Bagui, then you have the 8 trigrams used in the I Ching, or the foundation of the I Ching. And what that kind of means to you is, and we'll talk about this in Destiny and Free Will, is your constitution and your destiny. Okay, so now these cells, they're going to keep on splitting, right? And at some point in time, you're going to have 64 of these cells. And when you hit that is the 64 trigrams of the I Ching. And I have a diagram of the 64 hexagrams right here.
Wow!
And these represent the energetic potentials of life. So the I Ching, it has 64 hexagrams, and each hexagram is a combination of 2 Bagui. And the 64 hexagrams represent all the different energetics or potentials in life. Okay, so that brings us to the interesting part of destiny and free will. So you have the 8 extraordinary vessels, and they're essential because of a lot of reasons. One, they form the container that allows you to develop a physical body. The next thing is these 8 vessels, they form the energetic matrix that contains your life and your potential. So you can say that the 8 extraordinary vessels, the 8 Bagui, are your destiny, and destiny is the tools or skills you bring with you into this life. So let me give you an example. You might come into this world with the ability to have many friends. But, life happens all the time. So you have all these life experiences, and you interact with these experiences, and those interactions modify your behaviors. So, instead of being an open, happy, carefree person, you become hesitant, withdrawn, and untrusting, or angry, withdrawn, and lashing out. And so even though your 8 extraordinary vessels suggest you will have many friends, you still have to interact with the world and with life. And you have to make a decision on how you're going to respond to every situation that happens. And you have to create beliefs based on each one of these different situations in life. So every situation in life is energetics and potential, represented by one of the 64 hexagrams. And that's what free will is. So you have this destiny of what you can make out of your life, but you have the free will to decide on how you're going to interpret and how you're going to how you're going to respond to the world. And you know what? I get it, because sometimes life can get you down, and right now things can get you down, but what's forgotten is everyone has the ability to attain whatever their destiny is. I mean, you were given everything that you needed to have to attain your destiny. And the other thing is, everyone's destiny is great. It's just not what your neighbor's destiny is. So everyone's destiny has a real critical importance in the world and participates in the world in a really critical way. And you actually do have the strength to reach your destiny. It's just that, finding your destiny, well, okay, that's a whole nother discussion of, the greatness in you and in each and every one of us, if we could just let go of the hurt, right? So, and I know that feels like it's easier said than done, but the thing is, everyone has the strength to do it. Okay, so that's the concept of destiny and free will. And in the episode, Chinese Astrology 101, I talk a little bit more about destiny, decisions in life, and how you can respond to different situations in life. Okay, so let's talk about Ming Men, because this is where you start really getting into the first concepts in traditional Chinese medicine, where they really start talking about the different things in the body. And Ming Men is one of the first ones. So let's go back to these 8 extraordinary vessels. And so these 8 extraordinary vessels, they're this container of your physical body, and they're your energy matrix, and they hold your potential destiny. So what else do they do? Here's where the Ming Men comes in. So do you know where your Ming Men is? So put one finger on your belly button, and then take your other hand and put it on your back directly across from your belly button. So between here, this would be between your kidneys, And between your two kidneys is the Ming Men. And what they say in Chinese medicine is the Ming Men is this cauldron which creates the foundation of your life. And again, it sits between your kidneys. And another way that they call it is the fire of life. Well, those 64 cells that we were talking about that split, those 64 cells become the Ming Men. The body grows around these cells. Amazing, huh? So these 8 extraordinary vessels, they create the matchstick of your life. And when that match goes out, so does your life. So, wow, huh? These 8 vessels are incredibly powerful in your body. And it gets a little overwhelming for me to think about what these 8 vessels really represent in your body. So, I mean, if you think about it, the zygote is this one cell, this one itty bitty cell that represents a whole universe inside a cell. So if you think about people with really long lives, like living to 90 or 100 or longer, that is the prenatal energy that came from the zygote. So that one itty bitty cell contains all your prenatal energy. And that is really about, long life is really about prenatal energy, because how many times have you heard someone who's lived over 100 years say something like, "Oh yeah, I've been smoking and drinking since I was 4." And, so that person, they came in with like a gallon of prenatal energy, where most of us get like a cup or maybe a quart, and have to be reasonably cautious when we're using it so that we don't accidentally expend it all at once. Well, the zygote creates the 8 extraordinary vessels, and the 8 extraordinary vessels create everything else. So the zygote fills the 8 extraordinary vessels with prenatal chi. And that prenatal chi is your destiny, it's your vitality, it directs a lot of the energetics of your world. Okay, so that is the importance of these 8 extraordinary vessels. They represent almost all the esoteric information they represent a lot of the esoteric information in Chinese medicine. And so then the thing is can you use these 8 extraordinary vessels to treat disease? Well, you can use them for treating disease. And so when you think about disease, the 8 extraordinaries are everything that you got from your parents. They're your destiny, and your destiny is formed from your inheritance from your parents. So, genetic diseases, things that you inherited from your parents, think about using the 8 extraordinary vessels with those. And, genetic diseases are going to be interesting, because if you're a Chinese medical provider, there's a whole lot about the disease that will follow the flow of qi. And then there's going to be this whole piece that's not going to fit any logic, whatever. And okay, so the I Ching talks about the flow of qi, and why the I Ching is so important to study is because it talks about how disease will flow in the body. Well, one of the interesting things about inheritance is that it doesn't all logically follow the flow of qi. You'll, as a provider, I find that I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden there's like this huge gap that I can't make fit into traditional Chinese medicine. So The 8 extraordinaries can be used to help assist with a complicated and difficult disease, such as inheritance. But they can also help with things like chemical damage in the body. And again, one of the things with what I've noticed with chemical damage to the body is there's no logical reason for the damage that the person is experiencing. It doesn't follow the laws of traditional Chinese medicine. So when you're treating complicated genetic diseases or things like chemical exposure or other things that don't follow the flow of qi, it's because these diseases have sunk below the 12 channels or below the 12 organs and are now in this really deep layer that's your prenatal layer, what you brought into this world. Drug addiction, heroin addicts, that addiction takes so much of their vitality. That addiction, when you're treating them, you have to go into, well, it would help you out if you would go into the 8 extraordinaries because they've been consuming the energetics, the prenatal energy of the 8 extraordinaries. So one of the things that happens when you're looking at these really bizarre diseases that don't follow the flow of qi, it's because they've slipped under your physical body and they're now in your prenatal, what you brought into this world. Now, there's another way that you can use these, and you can use them to aid in emotional healing, especially when, you're so overwhelmed that with so many different situations that you can no longer find your balance. And, I had a situation like this. I had a situation where, I just lost too many people in this really, really short window, and they were very, very close to me. And it was just too many, and I couldn't handle it. And so using the extraordinary vessels helped me get back into balance. And when you use them in this way, what you're doing is you're asking the body to pull out a little bit of that prenatal qi to help you rebalance yourself. And so it's kind of like drinking a cup of coffee to wake up. But unlike a cup of coffee, these are not points you're going to use every day. The goal is to use them to pull everything back up into the 12 meridians or the 12 organs that, you and I are so familiar with. And let me just pull those up again. So to pull them back up into these 12 meridians. And because these points are so powerful, you don't use many of them when you're treating someone. So with the 8 extraordinaries, you're going to maybe use 2 to 6 points. Okay, so there's some thoughts on the 8 extraordinary vessels and Ming Men. Until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.